So the engine will turn over. Just goes clunk when I turn the key. The first thing we decided to try was checking the batteries. So we took the batteries out and had them tested. And they came back perfectly fine. So the second thing we decided is maybe it was the starter motor. So we're again off on an expedition to find a starter motor. It was, of course, a bit challenging because we were at anchor at Hospital Point, so we had to dinghy everywhere we wanted to go, and then once we got ashore, we would have to take Uber or Lyft in order to get to the place where we needed to go. I was pretty lucky. I was able to find a starter motor. Apparently, the starter motor for the Ford Lehman engine is pretty common. It's a Lucas starter motor, and I was able to locate one. And we came back.
So there's no reason. Well, I might as well just have you break it off
and put the starter motor in and tried it. And as you can see, it's installed there, but to no avail. Turned it over, same thing, nothing. Hermie and I had a long conversation about it. I'd actually felt pretty good about the starter motor. I couldn't believe it didn't work. But that boiled down to very few options. And so,
nothing like being towed into a marina. It looks like we got some engine issues going on.
So our destination for the tow is only 1,000 yards away. Tidewater Marina in Portsmouth.
You're on camera.
It's a nice marina, a little bit tight getting in. We tried to go in at low tide and actually got stuck. So we had to go over to a different slip than what they had planned. And here's the slip where they've towed us to. And that it's a pier. And this is where we're going to start tearing the engine down and seeing what we can find. The planned morning for departure, I got up and checked the oil and it was fine. But I checked the oil when we got into the slip and the oil level had risen. And that's when I started to get concerned. As you can see, there's water in the oil. And things just went downhill from there. The engine was waterlocked. And you can see there we have the injectors removed, and you can see water spilling out of where the injector holes are. Here we are trying to pump the water out of the engine, and you can see water flying up out of the injector holes. We're turning the engine over by hand and pumping it out. We pumped out almost 2 gallons of water out of the engine, and that was what we could measure. The support crew is obviously upset with Hermie because it was Hermie's responsibility to maintain the equipment on the boat, and letting the engine get waterlogged had both Stoney and Lucy very upset with Hermie. And they certainly took it out on him. And now comes time to solve the problem. One of the things I did was installed a valve in the muffler so that I could very easily drain the muffler and drain that long exhaust system.
Now the question is, can I get a zip tie on this?
Another thing I did was installed a vented loop.
And the answer to that is going to be tough, maybe.
This vented loop will prevent any chance of siphoning from the seacock.
This is a rather crude drawing, but it shows the basic plumbing layout of my boat. Water comes in through the seacock, goes through a sea strainer, goes through the raw water pump, and through the heat exchanger. From the heat exchanger, it crosses over top of the engine. You note that this little dotted line here is the water level, so it's above the water line here, and that dumps down into the exhaust injection elbow, and from there then the exhaust pushes the water out through the exhaust and out the back of the boat. There's a vented loop here in the very back. What had happened is I had idled the engine for maybe 10 minutes or so while carrying on a conversation and not thinking, and then just shut the engine down. And what had happened is water just gurgled through here and filled this line up right here and just gurgled out the back instead of actually being pushed out. When that happened, when I shut the engine down, there was enough water in here to suck a little bit of water over here into below the water line, and that was enough to create a siphon. And so the water actually siphoned from the seacock side into the engine. So I did three things. The first is I added a vented loop, and I put that vented loop in between the raw water pump and the exhaust injection elbow. I also added a drain to the muffler so that I could drain the muffler. And I also then changed my shutdown procedure. I increased the idle speed from about 500 to about 650, almost 700 RPM. And I also now, when I shut the engine down, I surged the engine 3 times in neutral to blow as much water out of this exhaust as possible so that I could never have this problem again. I've measured the water coming out of the muffler now after I do that, and I get a half a gallon of water when I drain the muffler. So I'm pretty happy with that.